Donald Trump called him tough. Rush Limbaugh read one of his articles live on his radio show. Ann Coulter tweeted that article to her 1.5 million followers and declared, "Every sentence is perfect." Ladies and gentlemen, your host, former chief editor of the Jewish Press, Elliot Resnick.
Welcome to the Elliot Resnick Show. Here with us today is Moshe Feiglin, a former Knesset member and head of the Zehut Party, which aims not to exert influence in Israel's government, but to lead it. Feiglin first entered the political arena some 25 years ago, and this past year has been sharply critical of Israel's government, castigating it for fighting with 1.5 hands tied behind its back. Immediately after October 7th, he proposed that Israel do to Gaza what the Allies in World War II did to Dresden, Germany. And a few months ago, he suggested that Israelis perhaps stop serving in the army if the IDF continues prioritizing the lives of enemy civilians over their lives. So first of all, Moshe, welcome to the program. Second of all, I want to start with this particular issue. Should a young 18-year-old Israeli fight for an army whose code of ethics places greater value on the lives of so-called innocent civilians of its enemy than it does on the life of the soldier?
It depends on one thing. Do they want to win? If at the end of the day, the goal of the war is victory, then you can swallow many, and it's a very painful swallowing, wrong values on the way. But if soldiers are giving their lives in order to protect the enemy's lives, and there's no such a goal of a total victory at the end of the tunnel, and after 10 months, in spite of all the heroism of the soldiers and the victory they achieve in any tactical battle they fight, the leadership of the army and the political leadership of Israel, taking all these amazing victories and connecting them to one big strategic defeat, those questions become serious. Do we still have to be part of that machine, monstery machine, that more and more soldiers giving their life for and not serving the right goal?
How would you fight the war if you were prime minister?
Let's not forget that the Gaza Strip, with another little piece called the Sinai Desert, and another tiny piece that's called Judea and Samaria, and Jerusalem, and a little teeny piece that's called the Golan Heights, was taken in 6 days, when the Israeli army was a quarter of its size of today, and dealt with real armies against it, with airplanes and tanks and whatever you want. So whoever tells you that we could not won this war in approximately the same amount of time is lying. The problem was not that there was no shells and ammunition from the United States and all this nonsense. It's simply because the Israeli leadership did not want to win. And they don't want to win because the Israeli leadership, during the years after the horrific agreements of Oslo, slowly but surely tied the strategic Israeli interest with the American interest. It was a process, but the bottom line of it is that the top commanders of the army in Israel has to get the approval of Washington before they get into position. It's a painful truth, but everybody should know that the major leadership of Israel, in the army, in the Mossad, in the Shabak, are not being nominated before they get the approval of Washington. So when the real challenge comes, they don't feel need to give answers to the people of Israel. All they have in their head is how to please the source of power that put them into position. They don't count the Israeli government anymore.
But if I've been understanding your writings correctly over the years, this is not an economic problem or a military problem. It's more of a psychological problem. Is that correct?
Definitely. And we wanted it to be this way. There was no American aid in 1948. There was an American embargo in 1948. There was no American aid in 1967. The embargo was still there in 1967. America started to make business with us when it seemed like after the big victory of the Six-Day War, it seems like it's worthwhile to have Israel as a strategic ally. This is all it is. And now that we've made ourselves the servants of America, we're paying the price. And for 10 months, our soldiers are killing themselves for an American interest, not for victory.
What's America's interest, except to have a sort of stalemate, I guess? I'm not really sure what America's interest would be in this fight.
The Americans has a plan of creating a Palestinian state and have some kind of unity between Jordan, what they call, of course, Palestine, Egypt, and all countries together under the umbrella of America. And in that big strategic plan, a victory of Israel on its enemies right now. Israel that is too strong is not good for that strategic concept. They want Israel to be weak, to be dependent, and to work according to their strategic interests and not our own interests. And unfortunately, the Israeli leadership in the army and in politics, I'm not taking any responsibility off Netanyahu's shoulders. He's responsible to that situation. He was aware of it all those years and let it happen and was part of it.
So I guess what people don't understand is because Zionism started, at least in part, because the Zionists were fed up with trying to please the world. They tried to assimilate in Russia. They realized it's not working. They said, stop. We don't care anymore what the nations think. We're going to create our own destiny in our own land. Enough of trying to please the nations. And yet here we have the leadership of Israel caring about what the nations think. So why do they care so much? Why do they put the nation's interests before their own?
Because there's a deep need of Zionism to be a nation like all the nations. What was the name of Netanyahu's book almost 30 years ago when he started his way up to politics? He published a book. What was the name? Place among the nation. That's all we want. To be Am Kechol Amim. Place among the nations. Find a place among the other nations. That's all. No vision. Definitely not Jewish vision. Thinking about Temple Mount. Temple, bring back the kingdom of God to earth, something that we created for, the whole concept of Judaism. No, all we want is to assimilate as a nation instead of individuals. And that wish to find some big brother that we can trust and not be alone. So instead of Yisrael betach b'Hashem, Israel, count on God, in God we trust. In the United States we trust. But that's the bottom psychological need for this whole situation. So what we need is to create a new leadership to the state of Israel that have faith, a leadership with Jewish faith that comes from totally different set of mind.
In terms of how to fight, so you said we could win the war more or less in a week, which would, I guess, involve a massive bombing campaign of some sort. Whenever I propose to people that we bomb Gaza to the Stone Age, they usually respond, what about the hostages? Now, I generally reply that the hostages are in grave danger either way, and that being tough is just as likely to save the hostages as being weak. But that's my answer. What's your answer?
You don't even need to bomb. All you needed to do is stop giving them gas, the gas that they need to create electricity. Of course, stop the electricity you're giving them for free. Stop the water. Stop the gas that they use in order to create electricity and to make sure that they can breathe in those tunnels. So if you want to breathe, you better come out. And if you want to come out and stay alive and not being thrown, tied up, and stripped out to the pigs to eat you, so we won't get even the 70 virgins from the stomach of the pigs, you better come out with the hostages. If you don't have at least one hostage in your hand, this is what's going to happen to you. You won't be able to breathe inside, and you'll be thrown to the pigs outside. That should have been the way to release the hostages. But instead of that, of course, the Israeli leadership, all they think of is the moral values of the land of Auschwitz, Europe, the moral values of the Americans who threw atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and burned every Japanese city that they got to. And there was no one Japanese Nukhba terrorist that came to California and did what they did here. And the Brits the same way. No Nukhba terrorist crossed the British Channel and did these horrific acts in Dover. Yet when they flipped sides and were able to attack the enemy, they burned every German city that could reach. Dresden and Hamburg and whatever. So instead of crawling to their values, start remembering your own Jewish values. What did Shmuel Hanavi, the prophet Shmuel, did to Hagag, the king of Amalek, when he caught him? Did he arrest him? Did he brought him to court? Brought him lawyers from all the world? No, he slaughtered him and gave his flesh as meat to the animals. That's what he did.
And people also don't remember that because we were so tough, America and England were so tough on Japan and Germany, there was peace for, and there has been peace for 80 years after the war. So it's counterintuitive.
Exactly.
When you actually, very harsh, you actually wind up having peace afterwards.
Right.
But when you said that they won't be able to breathe, you're talking about their ventilation system relies on energy. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make sure I understood you properly. Would you also be in favor of using deception to free the hostages, even if it requires, like, maybe for Israel to humiliate itself for a few days? So you agree, let's say, to release all the Arab prisoners from prison, but a week before they're released, you inject them with a disease that kills them a week later, or something like that.
No, I was not talking about that. But going back to that subject, we have to look at the mirror and tell ourselves the truth. What is the goal of that war? Hostages or victory? If your goal is victory, you'll get some of the hostages. If your goal is only hostages, you may get some of the hostages, but then you'll get a much bigger 7th of October later on and many more hostages. And those who are talking now about hostages and not about victory, inviting the enemy to do more of the same. Those forces that are screaming and yelling for the hostages are the same forces exactly that brought Oslo on us and a disengagement plan of us and the whole situation that created the fact that those hostages are held by Hamas right now. So who are we going to listen to now? To these forces? To those who think through the individual set of mind, don't see anything behind their nose in the immediate time, or those who think from the national set of mind and the national values and the national interests and see a bit further on? Who are we going to listen to?
In your mind, what does victory mean? Does victory mean the Arabs hang out white undershirts outside their windows and have a formal surrender ceremony? What does victory mean in your vision?
Victory means Israeli flag in the Gaza Strip, including no enemies anymore over there. Gush Katif is built and flourishing. Gaza is an Israeli city, just like Ashkelon and Ashdod. This is full victory. Nothing less than that.
Okay, let me ask you about Israel's Supreme Court. The court is a joke, and yet strangely most people on the right seem to respect its opinion and authority. I don't understand why. In his famous book, Democracy in America, Alex de Tocqueville wrote in 1835, quote, "It is a strange thing, the authority that is accorded to the intervention of a court of justice by the general opinion of mankind," end quote. He also wrote that the power of Supreme Court justices is, quote, "enormous, but it is the power of public opinion. They are all powerful as long as the people respect the law, but they would be impotent against popular neglect or contempt of the law," end quote. So my question is this. Next time Israel's Supreme Court hands down a ruling that makes a mockery of Judaism, democracy, fairness, and logic, why doesn't the Knesset just say, "Thank you very much for your opinion," and then ignore it?
Because a very weak leadership of the right wing.
That's it? That's the whole story?
That's the whole story. Yeah, I can explain you what makes them so weak.
Okay, please.
What makes the right leadership so weak is the fact that they have no ideology and no alternative to the leftist concepts, to the Oslo concept, which is basically the progressive concepts. And that's why it took them 3 weeks to decide what should be the goals of the war before they got into Gaza. And the real goal was not a victory. The real goal is to go back to the 6th of October and to the frame of Oslo, which the left side created 30 years before. They have no alternative to the leftist set of mind, the leftist strategy, and the leftist geopolitical goals. No one in the right, no one in the government, in the full right government, no one spoke about taking over Gaza and building again Gush Katif. No one. So do you expect from a right-wing leadership that don't look at reality through Jewish values, real Jewish values, to be able to stand against Bagatz, that being supported by all the other forces that are not electable, by the army, by the media, by the academy? Of course not. If you're empty inside, how can you stand against them?
It seems to me one reason why there isn't more normal people in the Knesset, perhaps people like you, is because people who have, I guess, the truth on their side or Torah on their side, they don't feel comfortable speaking their mind because they know if they speak their mind, they'll be kicked out of Knesset. So to me, it seems like the first step, if you actually want things to be accomplished, is to lift the ban on Kach. Not because Kach is so important. Maybe Kach is good, maybe Kach is not good. But until that ban is lifted, anybody who's half normal is not going to speak their mind. And if you don't speak their mind, Israelis won't vote for you. People only vote for truth. If you muzzle yourself, you're not going to get voted. So isn't the first step to lift this ban on free speech in Israel?
The Zehut party that I'm leading is in a very strong starting position, politically, very, very strong. Be'ezrat Hashem, we are going to bring an amazing result in the coming election, and we're going to lead the national camp. The goal is to replace Likud, lead the national camp, and at the end, lead the state of Israel. We have all the tools. We have all the frame. The reality is making our campaign right now. We're in a much, much better position than any other party in the past, including ourselves. And we're going to win because there's no one else. And there's no other way. Am Yisrael Chai, and Am Yisrael will win. And Am Yisrael Yinatzech. And when you look to your right, and when you look to your left, and no one else is talking the truth, and no one else is doing what needs to be done, then it is your obligation. B'makom she'en anashim, ishtadel liyot ish. Where there is no man, you should do your best to be the one. And it's not only about me, it is about everybody who think right now what they can do in order to save Israel and the Jewish nation. We're going to win because we have no other choice.
Are you afraid the powers that be crushing you, using the legal system to crush you, or no?
No, I'm afraid only from God. And a little bit from my wife. But
okay.
All right. That concludes our interview with Moshe Feiglin. If you're interested in his work, I have links to 2 of his books in the episode description. And if you enjoyed this interview, don't forget that there are around 70 other interviews, older interviews you could listen to. And there are 180 interviews in print that you can read that I did between 2006 and 2021. And they are published in 3 volumes called Movers and Shakers. Movers and Shakers Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. And all 3 can be found on Amazon, and there are links to those as well in the episode description. I hope you enjoyed the episode and have a great day or a great night, depending on when you're listening to this podcast.